In this video tutorial, we're going to use Photoshop Elements 9 to mimic the classic Polaroid transfer look that you get when you peel apart a Polaroid film as it's developing and place the negative onto a bit of paper perhaps or some cloth, and you get this amazing jagged border effect around the edge as well as some very distinctive colours. For example, here you can see we've got a bit of a yellowish hue to the skin tones, and compared to the original we've also got some lovely high contrast areas as well, which help reveal more detail and make the shot stand out much more effectively, as you can see when we do a before and after comparison. I'm just hitting Control Tab to cycle between two open documents. Now we've got lovely artifacts in Polaroid transfer images, like this border effect. You can see that the jagged effect you get by peeling apart the Polaroid creates this lovely texture around the edge of the frame, and I'm going to show you how to mimic that using brush tips. You've also got a ghost or a hint of the negative effect around the edge of the border, and I'll show you how to produce that too using a variety of different techniques. And the other cool thing, if I right click with the zoom tool and choose fit on screen, is we've got this rather cool border effect here. There's a bit of a vignette around the edge of the frame just to help frame the person and draw the eye towards the center of the frame to the main portrait. But the most important technique that you'll pick up in this tutorial is how to change color using levels. Now initially you think levels is just a way to change tone, but because colors are made up by mixing red, green and blue channels together, if we tweak the levels of individual channels we can also change color. So let's kick off by opening the start image, which is called Portrait Before, and you could think about using color curves to try and change this. If you go to Enhance, Adjust Color, pop down to Adjust Color Curves, then you can tweak these sliders here to adjust the contrast of various tones, and that will change the tones and colors in the shot as you tweak and drag. But it's very easy to clip things, blow out the highlights, clip the shadows and create rather posterized and over the top colors. So I'm going to cancel that, and I'm going to show you why levels is much more effective at changing color and tone at the same time. So you'll need the layers palette to work through this tutorial. If it's not visible, drag it from the panel bin, or you can go to Window and turn on layers like so. And then at the bottom of the layers palette you can click here and choose a levels adjustment layer, and that will appear at the bottom. You can always scale down the layers palette like so, and then drag this to dock it to the bottom of the palette so that both of these all float around together, which makes it a little bit easier to work with. Now if we drag the red, green and blue channels input sliders around, we can darken the blacks or lighten the highlights without changing the color of the shot. But if we delve deeper, we can adjust the colors individually and click on each channel and change its tones to get some dramatic and interesting color effects. So once you've set the drop down menu to the red channel, you can drag the highlight input level slider to the left, and you can see it's changing the way the shot's reds are mixing with the rest of the colors in the shot. So we take this to around about 243, that's a good starting point, and then we can darken the shadows by dragging this black input level slider to the right, and that gives us a more greeny hue if we go too far. So let's take this to around about 25 just to tweak the red channel. And because it's an adjustment layer, we can turn it on and off. There's the off option. You can see it's slightly warmer, and if we turn it on again, we've got a slight greener tint to the shadows, and we've lost some of the magenta in the hair as well. So we're beginning to tweak the colors, and the cool thing is by tweaking these input sliders, there's less chance of clipping compared to the amount of clipping you'd get if you were using adjust color curves. Now let's see what the green channel brings to the mix by clicking the drop down option and changing that to greens, and we can now change the way that the input level sliders are working by dragging the black shadow slider to 14 to darken the green's shadows. You can see the image colors are changing again. You can type in a value if it's harder to get it with the slider. There we go. And for the highlights, let's set that to 223 to brighten the green channel's highlights, and there you can see we've got a bit of a greener hue there going on compared to what we had before. There's the before and there's the after, so the cross-process colors are taking on a more stronger look. But we can also tweak the midtones by dragging this to the right to get around about 0.87, and that just darkens some of those midtones, and you can type in the value again just to get it as precise as the magazine version of this tutorial. So there we have a really distinctive looking color compared to the rather bland original colors. We're not quite finished yet, of course. We've got the blues to tweak. So let's choose the blue channel or press Alt+5, and we can then remap the tones in the blues channel to change the way the colors and the tones affect the image. Let's darken the shadows by dragging this to around about 26, and that remaps the darkest pixels in this particular channel. Let's lighten up the highlights of the blues a wee bit just to change the way the colour is blending, and we can then tweak the midtones as well. If I drag this to around about 0.81 or so, we can just darken the midtones, and that gives us a nice yellower look to our colour hues. So we've now got much more vibrant looking yellows, and we've got much more striking tones at the same time, just by tweaking the colour channels in the levels adjustment layer. Okay, we've finished with the adjustments layer now, so I can undock it by dragging it like so and clicking the X icon to clear some space. Now let's create a nice vignette effect by clicking here to create a new layer, and you get transparent layer 1 appear. Let's just open up the layers palette to see all of our layers like so. Now we're going to create the vignette by drawing straight onto this layer using the gradient tool. So click here to select the gradient tool. Click up here to make sure you've got a nice foreground to background gradient selected. Click OK. The type of gradient we want is a radial one. We want it to radiate out in a circular shape, so click radial gradient like so. Now you may have your foreground and background colours set to the default, which is a black foreground colour and a white background one. So I'm going to press D to set mine to the default as well, so it's going from black to white. In this case we need to click reverse because we actually want the gradient to go from white through to black. So make sure it's all set up in the same way as I've got it here, and then click on layer 1 to make sure it's selected. You might find it useful to press Ctrl- to zoom out so you can draw a bigger gradient, and then if you just click from the center and draw outwards with the gradient tool, you'll get this nice white to black gradient appear like so, and the darker corners there will help create the vignette effect. Press Ctrl+ to zoom in for a closer look, and then change the blending mode of the top layer to multiply, and the white areas become transparent, the grey areas are more visible, and the darker areas are stronger still. If you change the opacity to something like 50%, we can reveal more of the girl from the layer below and make the vignette more subtle, like so. Now we can then grab the brush tool, and because white becomes totally transparent, we can spray a white brush on the girl's layer and reveal more detail from her face, but keep those corners still nice and vignetted. So that's a nice little touch. There's the before and there's the after, and the vignette helps draw attention towards the center of the image. Now to really sell the Polaroid transfer look, we need to create a distressed border, and to do that let's create a new transparent layer to add the border to by clicking here. Then make sure you've got the brush tool selected, and then pop up to the brush preset picker, and there's some really cool brush tip shapes down the bottom there. If you click on here you'll see we've got oil heavy flow dry edges. That's a nice rough and ready shape, and you can then increase the size by dragging to the right here till we've got something around about maybe 300 or so in size. Then click on this top layer to target it, hold the shift key down at the top here, click, keep the shift key held, and then click again, and that draws a straight line between the 2 points and gives you a nice straight stroke. It doesn't matter if it's not perfectly straight because you've got this kind of organic rough edge effect, but you could always click again, hold shift, click again, and that might straighten it up a wee bit more when you click between the 2 points. Then shift again here to draw bottom, shift again, and slowly you're building up your rough edged border. Doesn't matter if there's bits missing, it just gives it a nice rough and ready effect. So shift click here, shift click at the top to draw this side of the frame, and again to the top like so. So it's fairly rough and ready, it's not very straight, but it's a cool way to create the Polaroid look. Now to finish off the Polaroid transfer effect, I'm going to create a slightly negative look to the edge of our distressed border, and to do that I'm just going to scroll down to the bottom layer, drag it onto the create new layer icon to copy it, and drag the copy to the top of the layer stack, and then press Ctrl-I to inverse it, and that gives us a cool negative effect. And now if I Control click on this layer 2 here, I can select the border, go to select inverse to inverse the selection, and then hit backspace when we go onto the top layer, and that cuts a hole in this selection here but gives us our negative edge. Control D to deselect the marquee. Now that negative effect is too strong, we're losing the Polaroid white border, so what I'm going to do is actually reduce the opacity by dragging here to the left, and that gives us an opacity, if we keep going, to around about 20% or so. If you click and drag to the left there, you can see that's a good way of adjusting things, or you could click here of course and drag this slider, or you could type into the fields and type a value of 20%, and then if we Control+ to zoom in, we can see that we've got this cool negative effect just around the edge of the frame, and that helps give us an authentic Polaroid look. But I'm going to go back to the zoom tool now, and I'm going to right click, choose fit on screen, hit tab to hide the floating windows, Et voila, there's our finished Polaroid transfer effect image with its delicate vignette, its distressed border, its cross-processed colours and its high contrast. So you can apply those effects to your own images and create your own Polaroid transfer effects.